When those dirt roads got dry, they got dusty. And of course, then they would have to come along with a water wagon like this and sprinkle the road with water. Fortunately, we actually have a photograph of one of these water wagons in Port Huron. And here it is. It almost looks like they're going out for a Sunday ride in this photograph. So what happened when this machinery broke down? Who fixed it? Well, the company had a large staff of trained mechanics present out on the road to effect repairs on all lines of Port Huron machinery. They had all their bases covered. They even had early success in the South American markets, but collecting monies from South America became difficult, if not impossible. So this venture proved not to be as lucrative as first envisioned by the company. During the early 1890s, America experienced a depression, and at several occasions the company was on the verge of financial ruin. In its impact on industry and employment, the depression of the 1890s was on par with the Great Depression of the 1930s. In some places, it began before 1890. A quarter of the nation's railroads went bankrupt. In some cities, unemployment among industrial workers exceeded 20 or even 25%. Unemployed tramps crisscrossed the countryside, walking or hiding on freight trains. Many appeared at the back doors of middle-class houses pleading for work or food. So how did the Port Huron Engine and Thresher Company survive this? Well, I'm glad you asked. I'll give you a hint. It has to do with this bicycle here called the safety bicycle. I'll give you the real answer in just a minute. The early bicycles looked like this. They were called penny farthing bicycles. Immediately I had two questions. Number one, why were they called penny farthing bicycles? And number two, why in the world did they have such a big wheel on the front of them? Well, the answer to my first question is they look like the British currency, the penny and the farthing. The penny being the bigger one representing the front wheel. But contrary to popular belief, the penny farthing wasn't the first bicycle. The first bicycle looked like this. They had a wooden frame and metal wheels. And pretty much daring young men rode these, and they liked to race, and so they would race these. And then they found out that the larger the front wheel, the faster the bicycle would go. And so you had a bicycle looking like this. The reason the bigger wheel would go faster is because the pedals were attached to the front wheel. So this was good. This one would be even better. In 1878, Albert Pope began manufacturing the Columbia bicycle outside Boston, starting their two-decade heyday in America. And here's a couple of photographs of the penny farthing races. I thought you might get a kick out of this next video clip. It shows the different bicycles that were available at that time, and this fellow rode them all. And finally, we have the safety bicycle. was called safety bicycle because of the fact that it was much safer than those big wheel bicycles where if you fell off you broke your neck. It was also easy enough for a lady to ride. And that's when the bicycle craze took off, when they started advertising for the ladies' bikes. We've all seen the history of when Henry Ford made his automobile and made it accessible and financially reasonable for people to have. Everybody wanted one. But if you're like me, I wasn't aware of the same thing happened with the bicycles before the cars. Everybody wanted a bicycle. They could afford one, they got one. If you had a horse, sell the horse and get a bicycle. Even the merchants started catering to the bicycle crowd. Cycle shoes for ladies and gentlemen. Eastman Kodak even came out with bicycle Kodaks. They attached right to your bicycle, and then you could take it off and take a picture as you pedaled along the trail. The fashion designers got in on this as well, designing bloomers not only for the ladies but for the men as well. Here's an ad for tailor-made walking and bicycle suits. Here's a couple ladies wearing their bloomers and riding their bicycle built for two. Even the music industry got in on this bicycle craze as well. So let's look at some of these titles. Daisy Bell, or better known as the bicycle built for two, is probably the one that most of us know. But there's others you're not familiar with probably, like the Cycle March two-step or the Cycle Parade March. Here's one, Riding on the Golden Bike, which was music used in minstrel shows. The Scorcher two-step. When bikes were really being ridden fast, they were referred to as scorchers. And last but not least, Bloomer's two-step march. On a side note, the word bloomer came from its creator, Amelia Bloomer. Bicycle shops like this one started to pop up around the country. Today we think nothing if everyone in the family has a bicycle, but back then that was quite unusual, and pretty much only the wealthy could afford to have bicycles for everybody. But here's a photo of a family that did. The safety bicycle with its equal wheels, rubber tires, and rear wheel chain replaced the suicidal penny farthings and other nervous-looking contraptions that made bicycling a dangerous sport. This new design created a bicycle craze throughout the modern world, especially because women could get in on the fun now too. But the bicyclists had a problem. And the problem was this: the roads that crossed the nation were meant for horses, carriages, coaches, and foot traffic, not vulcanized rubber. To make a trip between two towns, bicycle riders might end up having their teeth knocked loose from the ruts and sandbars that had accumulated on the ill-maintained trails. So, by 1891, cyclists in Boston formed the League of American Wheelmen, which advocated the building of better roads. Back then, folks weren't called bicycle riders, they were called wheelmen or wheelwomen. Contrary to popular belief, road improvements weren't the result of automobiles. The improvement of roads were first lobbied for and paid for by cycling organizations. Cyclists lobbied for better road surfaces for a full 30 years before motoring organizations did the same. Cyclists were actually ahead of their time. This bicycle phenomenon grew very rapidly. Tens of thousands of bicycles clogged New York streets at all hours during the 1890s. The Good Roads movement had their own national magazine, and this is the cover of one of the copies. And they even had their own music, Good Roads, Two-Step March. But most important was their lobbying. They lobbied the government to let go of some of that money that was so tight-fisted in their hands and spend it on good roads. Pretty soon, most states had their own Good Roads movement organization. And here you see the different states featured in these photographs. This one here is Wisconsin, and here we see Nebraska. When the government finally decided to come around and decided about building new roads, Port Huron Engine and Thresher Company was also coming around. Right there, they were Johnny on the spot. They knew that this could make them profitable, because then they could be selling the rollers, the pavement rollers, and they could be selling the pavement equipment. This would help them to recover from the financial crisis they were in because of the Depression. If you noticed in the last ad, and also in this ad you're looking at now, you could buy a new steamroller for $4,000. But if you already had one of their steam engines, you could adapt it to a roller by buying $400 worth of equipment. And basically what you're buying are just new wheels to put on your engine that you have. Good road movements wanted good roads in both the cities and the rural areas, but they concentrated mainly on the rural areas. Those roads were in the worst shape. Farmers had a hard time getting their produce to market or to the trains or wherever they had to take it. They would get bogged down. They were muddy in the springtime, they were dusty in the summertime, and they were bumpy all the rest of the time. The first modern roads in Port Huron weren't actually in the city itself, it was in Port Huron Township. Well, today it would be Port Huron because it was on 24th Street. And when I say modern roads, it's not like they are today. There was no cement involved or blacktop involved. It was all stone, but it was very well packed stone and were very successful as far as holding up under the weather. And they were named after this man here. John McAdam was a Scottish engineer who designed the first modern roads. He developed an inexpensive paving material of soil and stone aggregate, known as macadam. He discovered that massive foundations of rock upon rock were unnecessary, and asserted that the native soil alone would support the road and traffic upon it, as long as it was covered by a road crust that would protect the soil underneath from water and wear. By today's standards, this road wouldn't look too great, but back then, it was a cat's meow. I mean, look at the right side. That's what roads used to look like back then. And then on the left side, the macadam road was much improved. Now let's go back over 100 years ago and take a look at an actual photograph taken during that time of the first macadam road in Port Huron. And the road you're looking at here is actually 24th Street. The road on the left has just been macadamized, and the road on the right, nothing's been done with that. You can see the streetcar tracks going right down the middle of the road, and on the right of that, of course, nothing was paved. Quite often, which was the case in Port Huron, they only did half a road at a time because, well, until the rest of the money came in, they couldn't finish the other side of the road. I found this article in the Good Roads magazine. I had to go through a lot of magazines to find it. But it talks about the macadam roads in Port Huron, Michigan. And it says this regarding the 24th Street road that we just looked at. Before the macadam road was built, the travel on 24th Street was about equally divided between the two sides of the railway, or road, the railway being the streetcar tracks. But as soon as the new road was finished, it took all the travel, and the east side grew up to weeds. Till last year, when that side also was macadamized. The secret of the macadam road is that the stones were very small that they used. Mr. McAdam said that if the stone doesn't fit in your mouth, then it shouldn't go on the road. So how did these stones get so small? Does anyone know of a company that was able to sell machinery that would be able to crush these stones like that? I do. The Port Huron Engine and Thresher Company. They sold what they called stone crushers. And I just happen to have a video here taken in modern day, but it was an old time stone crusher, probably very similar to what they used in Port Huron. I thought you might enjoy seeing that in action. Well, I think you get the idea. Join me for part 4 in my next video as we finish up the story of the Port Huron Engine and Thresher Company.